Pat, this is one of those special Nostalgia Like Nostalgia episodes because every once in a while we talk about a movie that is special to me that you have no connection to. Usually it's the other
Right,
way around, and
right.
you're guiding me through this whole journey. Today, in the spirit of the season, and because you've got a show coming up this weekend, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, today we're talking about Santa Claus the movie from 1985, which is it's essentially if you watch it and you think, man, this feels a lot like a Superman film, it's because it was produced by the Salkins, Alexander and Ilya, who brought us the Superman franchise. And in fact, when this came out in '85, they done Superman the movie, part 2, part 3 in '83. In '84, they did Supergirl, and folks are kind of fizzling out on the whole Superman Supergirl thing. They're like, well, let's turn Santa Claus into Superman. And then they brought us this, and they had I remember there being tie-ins with Happy Meals and Coca-Cola. You couldn't avoid Santa Claus the movie unless you were going to buy tickets for it, because this was a massive flop in '85.
You
We're
can
going to talk
believe
about it.
you can believe a sleigh can fly was what the wags said.
Oh my goodness. First of all, Pat, how
Yeah.
are you?
Good, good, good. Just it's a very busy time. I've got rehearsal right after this, so yeah, we're getting into the danger zone when it comes to the play. So uh,
Well, let's pull over for a second. Tell us
yeah.
about the play, as if people don't know. They're the fans of this show are going to get tired of us talking about this
Oh,
every
sure they
year.
are.
No.
Sure they are. Well, as you recall, I think was it last year or 2 years ago, where we, for our holiday overview, we did the Judy Garland show 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago because last year, inspired by that show, we talked about Meet Me in St. Louis, which I'm glad we did.
Very good,
Yeah.
very good. So yes, so this is called A Judy Christmas. It is a recreation via a stage play of the 1963 Judy Garland Christmas special, part of her regular series at the time. And it's a bizarre, campy take on it, and very funny, hilarious, by the way. And we're hoping to sell out the run again. So come on down to the Den Theater on Milwaukee, and the show times 8 o'clock on Friday the 20th, 8 o'clock on Saturday the 21st, and a 3 p.m. matinee for seniors like me on Sunday the 22nd. You can't get any better than 3 days before Christmas if you want to get into the Christmas spirit.
I know that's
we do a good job
wild.
with that. Yeah, terribly wild, isn't it? So
Yeah. Well, speaking of wild, I am anxious and more than a little scared to hear what you think of Santa Claus the movie, because this was one of those staples it came out when I was about 8 years old, so it was right in that sweet spot. I watched it on repeat on, cable, and then I think I hadn't watched it in about 30 years, in preparation for this show, or maybe it was even more than that. Wow, man, Pat, I'm old. 35 years? Is that possible? But yeah, so I watched it again. I got the same warm fuzzies, not as much cringe as I usually get when I'm revisiting something from my childhood.
oh, that's
But
good.
but this movie was a flop. It was a critical nightmare. It's got like 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. John Lithgow, star of this picture, says that he thought it was kind of dumb, but apparently it was a huge hit over in the UK. So
Yeah, isn't that wild?
he gets tons of Brits coming up and saying, "Man, that Santa Claus is my favorite movie," or something. So, Pat, what did you make of Santa Claus the movie?
Well, listen, the first actually, I'll use the old shark jumping analogy. When Lithgow comes into the picture, I believe the film jumps the shark. Otherwise, the first hour I thought was kind of whimsical. I was kind of digging it, and I thought, it seemed like everybody had bought into it. Huddleston, who was playing, that great character actor, David Huddleston, he was playing Santa, perfectly, and it had some roots in his roots, Santa Claus's roots, as a kind of a Norwegian folk hero, and very magical how he becomes Santa. I mean, the whole thing. I was that prolonged sequence where they just showed the mechanics of that toy making. There I go again. Oh, there I am. That toy making operation I thought was fantastic. I really did. I loved the whole thing. But when Lithgow came in, it became something else, and it seemed to trip over itself until it just kind of ended. And that's really my overall assessment. I mean, to describe the picture is easy. It's the origin of Santa Claus, and then, with some other elements thrown in. But of course, there's a villain, and Lithgow plays the villain. And I have to give him credit for the performance. I mean, it was way over the top. And I doubt that director had any control of what he was doing. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, thank goodness for that, because I mean, here's the thing. I can understand where you're coming from, because watching it again, first of all, my recollection of his character was that he shows up early in the movie. I thought they were kind of doing intercutting between what's going on at the North Pole and what's going on in New York. No, in this hour and 46-minute movie, we don't meet the villain until the hour mark. It's almost precisely an hour when we cut to modern day New York, and there's like a Senate hearing or something, or some kind of a hearing that Lithgow is at. He's the owner of BZ Toys, and he is, of course, BZ. And he's being taken to task by these unsafe toys. There's a doll with a flammable dress. And then my favorite, and for some reason, this is a triple dent gum moment that just randomly pops in my head on, for no reason throughout the year. It doesn't have to be Christmas, but the scene where they break open the teddy bear and there's glass and nails falling out on the table, and you see Lithgow like wiping his brow. He's all very nervous because he knows he's screwed. It's over the top. He connects with one of Santa's elves, who's played by Dudley Moore, I think, in a very surprising and lovely performance.
I thought so too.
Yeah, but at one point, Lithgow gets the idea for doing a second version of Christmas in March, because they stumble upon this idea of an enchanted candy and it sells out. So like, we got to make another batch. Let's do it. And then Patch, the elf, is like, that won't be ready for 3 months. And he's like, great, we'll do Christmas 2.
Yeah.
Classic marketing.
And then again, I had no problem with Lithgow's performance. What I had problem with was how the story kind of rendered. It seems like there was some significant stuff cut to get into the kid-friendly 90-minute realm, or 98-minute realm. So there was a lot of exposition that I thought wasn't necessary. Like, for example, the counting down of the centuries as we see Santa approach the 20th century after he gets his magical powers. I'm like, that was expensive. You had to get, if you're going to do a film primarily set in the 20th century, you don't have to have the exposition that you had beforehand. That's just second guessing, of course. Who knows how many script doctors are on this? It seems like one of those classic, we're going to bring a rewrite man in 5 times, or something like that. And Dudley Moore said this is going to kill his career. In fact, him and Lithgow, when they saw the first cut, said the same thing about their careers, whether it would survive it. But he's actually quite good in it. I like the character of Patch, and I like how he played it. It was simple.
Well, it's, the passing of the centuries thing, I can understand, because it does feel a bit weird. But to your point, it feels like there might have been material cut out of here, because what it does is it shows us the modernization of the world, moving from a place where you can have people living in the woods in the snow, and this jolly guy and his wife come down every year and give these handmade, hand-carved wood toys to kids. They're essentially like little statues. They don't really do anything. To the evolution of what the elves are making up at the North Pole, things with wheels and more elaborate toys.
Sure.
To modern times where there's so many things with electronics in them that at one point Santa Claus is depressed because nobody believes in him. The world is kind of moving on. I think that's what that is supposed to represent. I feel like if they'd given some more attention to that, showing the world's faith gradually declining, or cynicism rising more to that point, then I think the New York stuff wouldn't have been as abrupt. Because you're right. We've got Joe, the little homeless kid. We've got Cornelia, who's the rich girl who, spoiler alert, turns out to be John Lithgow's character's niece. There's like a kidnapping plot, then exploding candy canes, and all very thrilling stuff in the moment. But compared to the deliberate kind of build-up we get in that first hour, it does kind of feel like, okay, we got to throw some kind of plot into this thing. Let's go.
And also, too, you say spoiler alert. There's no way you can spoil this movie. I mean, I'll tell you the ending straight out, and I bet you can guess it. But one of the things I really liked about the movie is that it lived in its own universe, meaning that we had, the absurdity of the North Pole and the elves and all that stuff. Everybody. It seemed like everybody was buying in and believing it, led by Huddleston, of course, because he's Santa Claus. But I got like a warm, fuzzy feeling about that, rather than being, not being prepared for the last third of it. I felt like I was in all the way through that, which I really enjoyed. And I don't know, I saw it on Amazon Prime, so the colors were beautiful in this. I said, boy, this is a big screen movie if I've ever seen one, because there's a lot of really nice, they were using the Superman stuff to a different take and a different advantage, including a scene where the sleigh is going to fly directly into the Twin Towers. Now, who could have called that?
Oh man, I did see that, and then I started going there in my head, but like, nope, cynicism be gone. This is magic.
Well,
this is
and he pulled out of it at the end.
Yes.
Well, first, whenever I see old New York, like in the 80s, this is the 80s, I'm like, oh, when am I going to see those towers? Not only did I see them, they participated in the you could believe a sleigh could fly bit.
Yeah, man.
Just like, what was it? Is it Home Alone, or no, Trading Places? The ending, the whole ending takes place at Twin Towers.
Yeah, and there was, of course, the Spider-Man trailer with the webbing and stuff.
Yes,
man.
Well, one more quick. I think we mentioned this though when we talked about Godspell. They do a scene where they're dancing on top of the towers right before they opened. So a lot of movie stuff with the Twin Towers. So anyway,
yes.
R.I.P. By the way.
Right. Well, I mean, it makes sense because they're so iconic that nobody could have foreseen. Absolutely. Like, man, something tragic's going to happen. We're just going to use these as our whimsical set piece.
Nobody's going to guess that.
But actually, speaking of, you were talking about the colors. The version I watched, because I rented this on Prime as well, there was a Canal Plus card beforehand talking about the digital restoration of it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw that version, but they apparently, for somehow, it makes sense now that I mentioned that Lithgow quote, because I didn't read that until after I saw the movie. Right, but this is, it's a British effort to go in and restore this movie. So when I first saw this, I'm like, Studio Canal, that's kind of odd that they would devote all this time to cleaning up Santa Claus the movie. What the hell? Makes sense now. And they did a hell of a job, because
it's beautiful.
It's pristine. I love that they have the little kind of hand painted, or however they did that, the little sparkly bits coming off the enchanted reindeer food, which Patch the elf uses to create the enchanted lollipops and candy canes. I guess we should get into somewhat of the plot of this movie. As you mentioned, you've got Claus and Anya, his wife. They get stuck in a snowstorm. They kind of get lost. They get welcomed in by the elves, who show them their toy making factory. And this wise old elf, played beautifully in like a 3-minute scene by Burgess Meredith, comes and basically, but it's one of those. But he's ancient, I mean, as an actor and as a character, but he has such, you talked about playing it straight and being committed to these characters. There's no irony. There's no like, this is a paycheck. You believe that this ceremony is happening where Claus becomes Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And he gets into the whole thing of like learning to fly with the reindeer and dropping off presents and all that business. But he does come across a homeless kid named Joe in New York City, who kind of takes under his wing and flies him around on Christmas Eve. They deliver presents together. It's kind of cool that the explanation for how things go, because Claus at one point when he's talking to the wise old elf, he's like, "Wait, I'm going to do all of this in one night? That doesn't make any sense." And the elf says, basically, the night never ends for you until you get your job done.
Right.
So it's like he could take like 3,000 years in his time to deliver these presents, because you'd got to, delivering all over the world. But in real time, it's one night. Kind of fun. Doesn't make any sense, but it's cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've got this homeless kid, Joe. You've got Cornelia, who they kind of know each other through like seeing each other through the windows and on the street and stuff. But then you get into Lithgow's character, who takes advantage of Patch the elf. Now, Patch, played by Dudley Moore, he's a visionary elf. He sees way beyond like hand carving, like wood, dollies and statues and things, to, hey, what if we could automate the production process here at the North Pole?
Strange.
And there's ultimately like competition to become Santa's assistant. Him and this other elf get into a contest. Patch builds this giant, elaborate patch-o-matic machine, and it's like he's got this giant mountain of toys, and the other guy's got like a little table full of handcrafted goodies. The problem is, Patch gets the job, his toys go out, but they're all shoddy and flimsy and fall apart because it was a crappy production line. So Patch is ashamed. He gets stripped of his assistant duties. He leaves the North Pole and winds up in New York in the clutches of our BZ. And yeah, he's kind of naive. BZ does a great job of kind of shielding him from the press, and he says, "What's that about a congressional hearing?" He's like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just news propaganda. Don't listen to that rag." And so, of course, at the end, Santa Claus and Joe and Cornelia have to kind of unite to save Patch, literally, because he has these candy canes that he's enchanted, not realizing that if they are left exposed to warmth, because he comes from the cold, they'll explode. And anybody who has one of these candy canes, particularly if you eat them, they'll probably explode if you're in a warm climate. So yeah, very thrilling. And my question, Pat.
Yes.
I love this movie, but there are some things that have bothered me for 35 years or whatever it's been. Santa, first of all, Joe is the first homeless person that he has ever encountered in 1985 New York.
Yeah.
He's literally flying around talking to his reindeer like, "Oh, all the children of the world are so blessed and everyone's got a great home and a family." And then he's like, "Wait a second, what's that?" And he kind of engages with him like a science experiment. But he takes him out on this ride and says, "Okay, I'll see you next year, Joe." I'm like, "Wait a second, you're literally going to leave this,
and you're leaving him in Cornelia's house."
Well, this is before that, because that doesn't happen until the end of the movie when he gets a fever and she takes him in. But there's like a year or two where he goes and visits him, and he's like, "Well, I'll see you next time, kid. Have fun in the streets of New York," as a homeless 9-year-old. Really strange.
Yeah. Well, no, when they first encounter each other, he leaves him at Cornelia's house because he knows her. And then that's when he says, "I'll see you
in the living room."
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Again, all the origin stuff was good. I mean, kids, when they're obsessed with Santa Claus, as I was when I was a kid, loved it. I love a year without Santa Claus, or whatever that was. Santa Claus is coming to town, because it told you some things about the origin of him. And I, as a kid, when I was a kid, I was fascinated with origins and trivia and stuff like that. So this one was good with that. They talked about the magic. They talked about how he could do the run in one night. Very odd casting of the children. I noticed that the actor who played Joe didn't have anything else on IMDb. But the girl playing Cornelia, they got the oddest looking little girl, and then they put a bad wig on her. That had to be a wig.
I
She had
I just thought it was
like
like
this.
it was like the Prince, like a strawberry Prince Valiant thing going on. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
it
weird.
was. I don't. I said I think I remember '80s hairstyles. I don't think girls wore that, but it was just was unnatural for I don't know what was she 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't know, but yeah, it was that was odd casting. She was an odd looking girl. No offense if you're watching this, darling. We're just seeing it right now. So. I also read that Jimmy Cagney was offered the ancient man role. You know, remember he had done Ragtime, and you know, kind of was like looking for things before he died, and he was just too ill to do the role. And
Well, I mean, speaking of alternate casting, I mean, the role of BZ, that's the craziest one because they'd thought about Gene Hackman, of course, with the
right,
Superman connection, but then they also put out offers to Harrison Ford,
right.
Dustin Hoffman, Burt Reynolds,
Oh boy,
Johnny Carson.
that's weird.
Yeah, and
Carson
yeah,
was always being offered. I think they did it for publicity a lot of times. Carson was supposed to play himself in, you know, The King of Comedy, but he told Scorsese, "There's no way." He said, "There's no way I'm going to do that because then I'll get stalkers." And he does, you know.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
Wow,
he that was the first guy Scorsese wanted real life, a real life dude. And
man.
but I can't imagine it without Jerry Lewis. It's almost his best role ever.
Yeah.
So
Um, but yeah, I mean, I like Lithgow in this role because he's completely over the
so
top.
do I. Yeah.
He's hamming it up, but doing really interesting things, like with
Yeah.
his cigar and just like you feel like you can feel the evil, the corruption in him, but also this nervousness, like he's always on the verge of getting arrested.
Well,
There's just
I
something
feel
about
like
him.
he made like 300 notes on how this character should be, and then just kept memorizing them, and then said, "Okay, here's my performance." That was one of the things. And when I took some acting classes in Chicago, they said, if you're going to do one thing, just write down the characteristics that you think your character has, and then before you go on stage, just throw them over your shoulder. Don't ever go back to them. They'll just come up as you're trying to develop the character. And that's exactly how I think Lithgow approached that. I, I really, he is a real consummate actor, and he doesn't play around. And I don't think he was playing around with trying to develop this character. Again, I think the story did him no favors. Let's talk.
Well, I just real quick, sorry.
No worries.
The one moment that I thought was a great choice and a great bit between him and Dudley Moore is Patch at one point when he's talking about making a product for BZ, you know, that's going to help him get back in the good graces of America or the world or whatever. He said, "Yeah, we're going to make this special candy and we're going to give it away for free." And you see BZ, he starts literally choking. And Patch is like, "Sir, are you okay?" And he's like, "For free!" And he just roars it. It's man, I didn't realize until watching this movie again how much of it has just been stuck to my soul like gunk to my lungs during cold season for the last 3
Hilarious.
decades. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I think that Lithgow faced a page of lines that he's just like, I can't do this role. It's so stupid. But what if I did it this way? If I did it this way, then I could tolerate it. And that's. But I was going to bring up the Patchmobile, which
Mm.
was an odd thing that came again after the hour had gone by in the film. Suddenly, Patch has made this automobile, which reminds you of the Homer mobile from that famous Simpson episode. I was like, this is completely designed so erratically that it's not worth putting in the film, but they did anyway. Of course, to put the candy canes are going to explode in the trunk. And
And they're
spoiler alert.
magically suspended in there because the trunk is open while they're flying all over the place. The trunk's open with the candy
Yeah,
canes. They're not flying out or falling out. I don't know. But you know, I
wow.
noticed that at one point when because Joe kind of hitches a ride with Patch in the Patch mobile as they're flying around. And at one point they turn a knob and there's that video game sound, which is the same sound they used in Superman 3 when they're flying the missiles to kill Superman at the end.
Yeah, they mentioned some of those sound effects. It's pretty funny. There's lots of dancing in this. They're
Mhm.
dancing. They're dancing up a storm. I mean, a drop of a hat, and suddenly there's this North Pole maypole dance. It's just it was
Well,
part of the charm of the universe, I thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love that because you have the stereotype of the jolly old elf and all that, but showing how much these elves are committed to making these toys because they love all the kids of the world. And it was kind of a neat idea of you get the idea that Claus and Anya could not have kids of their own. So when
Yeah,
the old elf says, "You're now Santa Claus and all the children of the world are yours," there's that really affectionate kind of feeling. He takes on that responsibility of being, the world's dad, and you can really feel that. But talking about the elves dancing, they're doing that while they're working. They've got kind of a rhythm while they're,
yeah,
sawing and carving and whittling.
yeah,
You really get the feeling that they're into this and they're working in a really magical factory. One of the comments I read about this movie is that it looked cheap and the sets looked terrible and something about like, cheap looking wood. I'm like, in what world are you watching Santa Claus the movie and looking at this magical set, multiple sets? They have multiple rooms. It's not like they picked one thing and just shot it from a bunch of different angles and said, "Oh, these are 6 rooms." They actually built these things and they're incredible.
yeah. I was I it, I felt really satisfied with the art design of the piece. It added to, as I said before, the buying into their universe. By establishing those special effects in the beginning, they were able to add to it by creating this space that these elves worked in. And you're like, okay, now I'm really into this. I really was, and I really mean it. And oh God, there was something I wanted to say. I wanted to talk a bit about the reindeer itself. Now, were those puppets? Do you think?
They It's weird because some of it had to be puppets, but some of it I couldn't tell if they were using like for the wide shots, of them in the stables and stuff, real reindeer or something approximating them. But then the close-ups, because they do have so much personality but they're
Right.
they're so well done that you do wonder. Yeah, I
I think it was puppetry, but you're right. I read that they did use real reindeer. In fact, it was one of the hardest elements of the training of animals. Like reindeer are not very trainable, apparently, and they have to wait for their antlers to grow. But they managed to get them to run as a team. Obviously, in the shots where you see the sleigh landing and then pop 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 to the end. But yeah, but all the close-ups they would do expressions. A single tear would run down their furry face. You know?
Yeah, and they reminded me. I talked about the Santa Claus with Tim Allen a few weeks
Ah,
ago. Another, I think a classic that is not necessarily as highly rated as I think it should be. But yeah, they had some animatronic reindeer in that. It was very, very effective. It felt sort of a piece with Santa Claus the movie. Um, yeah, I want to talk about David Huddleston because I mostly knew him. I'd seen him in things before, but I mostly remember him from, of course, this movie. But playing the grandfather on The Wonder Years. I think
oh,
he was Kevin's granddad, and he's just so warm, but it's not a one note performance. You
no, it
kind of get the
isn't.
idea of like, oh, he's just gonna be this jolly old guy. It's kind of like when people say there are no great Superman stories anymore because he's a boring Boy Scout. But then you watch what Christopher Reeve does with him, and you're like, there's interest, there's nuance there, and that's what I think Huddleston brings to this role when he gets depressed because he feels like he's no longer relevant or kids don't love him anymore or he's being outshone by Patch with his special candies. That he gets to one apartment to deliver presents and he sees that Patch has already been there, and you're wondering how did he accomplish that feat. You really feel all the nuance of the performance. The one thing he doesn't really show, I don't think, is anger, but you kind of get the idea, well, it's Santa Claus, he's
Sure.
seen it all.
You bring up a good point with this with Christopher Reeve as Superman and Huddleston as Santa. I always thought that Henry Cavill too kind of got the Superman thing, but had a
Yeah.
bad script, had bad stories and scripts, and it's just Huddleston. is kind of immune from the story because he's the hero, right? So he doesn't have to endure some of the plot points. So,
You know,
and go ahead.
no, I was going to say, it's funny. Did you ever see the movie Fat Man from a few years ago where Mel Gibson plays Santa Claus?
No.
At some point, you got to watch Fat Man. It's an action comedy about a depressed, jaded Santa Claus, and a little boy who hires a hitman to kill Santa Claus. And being attacked by this hitman, threatening his life, kind of helps Santa get his mojo back and find a reason to live. It's Walt Goggins plays the hitman. But I'm just saying, it would make more sense if you'd seen the movie. But I'm just thinking, like, I could see how this Santa Claus could, like, that could be a sequel to this movie if things went horribly wrong, even after Joe came to live with them and everything.
So Gibson plays Fat Man, and he's actually Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you don't see him. It's been a while since I watched it, but I don't think you see him like delivering presents or anything. At this point, he's just pretty much hanging out at the North Pole with his wife and, tending to the business of like living at the North Pole. Yeah, it's a wild movie. But
you could do a whole book on Gibson's post traffic stop movies. You could.
Which
so
I
bizarre.
generally really dig, but didn't he direct that new Wahlberg airplane movie with Topher Grace?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't
I
recall the title.
I think I blocked it out because I'm like,
It's
I
not
don't believe.
Carry On, is it? Is it coming
No,
out? Oh, okay.
no, that's a
See,
different
I'm
one.
not paying attention to anything of these days. It's just
It's all
I'm
right.
flooded.
We're getting out of award season, so it's like our
Oh,
brains are scrambled anyway.
oh.
But all right, any I guess any closing thoughts on Santa Claus? I mean, we've talked about we've covered a lot of ground. I'm glad that you enjoyed it as much as you did. I I think because it's so ingrained in me, I watched it since I was a kid. I
Yeah,
can't really allow the flaws that you see in it that I fully recognize to
right.
taint my vision of it. But I can completely understand someone
Well,
come
I'm
to it and
glad.
say, yeah, the second part doesn't work.
Well, it's just something as a Christmas film and media aficionado and somebody who does a lot of work in this space. I anticipated seeing this for a long time, and in fact, I'd always thought, oh, Pat and Ken at the holidays have to do this. It's always on my radar. So I was glad to get the opportunity to do it in this format to kind of give it a good going over. Um, again, if I were to give it a rating out of 5, for example, I'd probably give it a 3 because I did like it enough to recommend it to someone. But look at those 2 stars that are off of it and understand that there are some pitfalls within the journey of the plot. That I think that's what really handcuffed it, not the first part of the magic. It was the second part of the story. In some sense, they could have stuck with the origin, kind of you could put the homeless kid in there. That's good, but create something else. You don't necessarily need a villain in every film, but that was the Salkin way back then. That was the way for every hero you had to have a memorable villain, and unfortunately with this formula it didn't work. Lithgow notwithstanding, because he did a heck of a job interpreting a very stupid role. So yeah, 3 out of 5 is my rating, just to give people an idea where I'm at with it.
I would give it a 4 out of 5,
All
but
right.
I'm going to acknowledge that the reason for that extra star is pure nostalgia.
Exactly.
But I would say, Pat, I understand again where you're coming from, but I think if they were to remake this movie, I hate even putting that out there,
I
but
do.
if there was a bit of a more thorough going over or thinking about kind of the themes of the movie, I think that second half, you're almost not meant to respond to it as strongly as the first half because it's all about, through the passage of time, the cynicism, how
Right.
Christmas is kind of become uglified and commercialized. And it's like,
Right.
it's just kind of gross now. But Santa Claus can overcome that and help people believe again. Yeah, maybe a more deft hand could sell that message, because there is kind of an abrupt screech when we cut to that hearing, and it's like now we've got nails and dolls on fire.
Well, and for you MBAs out there, there's a lot of business startup reconstruction in it. So that's something special for these times.
Well,
And it was commenting on, what was happening in the 80s as well, as
oh
we
yeah.
were moving into a digital universe. So if you want to do your thesis in your MBA class on Santa Claus the movie, I think it would be legit.
Yeah, you could pair that with Wall Street and really have
Yeah, there you go.
a hell of a paper.
There you go. 1980s economy.
And then throw a little bit of Family Ties in there with Alex P. Keaton. All right. So, Pat, thank you for hanging out
Yes.
and talking Santa Claus with me. One more time, tell us about A Judy Christmas.
A Judy Christmas will be December 20th, 21st, 22nd, dentheater.com. You can go get your tickets there. And I'll tell you, you'll have a great time. We sold out last year. We'll probably sell out again. So please go online right now and pick up your ducats.
All right. Well, thank you. This is our last show of the year for Nostalgia Like Nostalgia. I apologize. I wanted to
No.
get the Kennedy show in for
Yeah.
November, but the year is my enemy. Time is my enemy.
Yeah.
But next year, 2025, we're going to come roaring back, and we're not going to miss that.
Well, I have to, as a quick plug too, if you go on my YouTube channel, Pat Uber TV, I got to interview the curator of the JFK 6-4 Museum. It's quite a journey, and I'm particularly proud of that interview. So yeah, the subject I'm most passionate about, talking to the world's expert on it. Pretty cool. Pat Uber TV.
And I'll leave a link to that below, but it also,
Thank
again,
you.
reminds me of that Bill Hicks joke. They turned the 6th floor, the book depository, into a museum, and it's really accurate because Oswald wasn't in it.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. With that, we'll leave on an assassination joke.
Yes. Merry Christmas, my friend. Have a good holiday season. And thanks for everything you do for the culture of Chicago film. You're really a fine contributor to our context. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And I wouldn't be able to reach these amazing heights if it weren't for guides like you. You're blazing the trail, and I'm really following on the coattails. So thank you, Pat. Merry Christmas and blessings. And folks out there, follow Pat at Hollywood Chicago. I'll have links to his stuff below. And if you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much. Take care and have a Merry Christmas.
Blessings.